The best moments in our lives usually occur when a person's body or mind is stretched to its limit in a voluntary effort to accomplish something difficult and worthwhile. If on our journey we constantly avoid uncertainty, risk, struggle, emotional exposure, or potential disappointment, we will miss out on the greatest opportunities for joy and fulfillment. We will prevent our soul from developing tenacity and grit. Seeking new ways to challenge ourselves on the journey, being vulnerable, and facing our fears lead to growth and joy. I was in the swim team pickup line waiting for my daughter Ellen to finish practice. I could immediately tell something was wrong by the way she was standing. She flung herself into the front seat, and before I could ask her about practice, she was in tears. "What happened? What's wrong?" She stared out the window, drew a deep breath as she wiped her tears on the sleeve of her hoodie, and said, "I have to swim the 100-meter breaststroke at the meet on Saturday." I knew this was a really bad thing in her world. "You don't understand. I can't swim breaststroke. I'm terrible." I begged my coach not to put me in the event. I was getting ready to respond with something empathetic and encouraging as I pulled into the driveway, but just then she looked me right in the eyes, put her hand on the top of my hand, and said, "Please, Mom, please help me. I'm still going to be swimming when the other girls are getting out of the pool, and the next heat is getting on the blocks. I'm really that slow." I couldn't swallow. I couldn't think clearly. All of a sudden, I'm 10 years old, and I'm on the blocks getting ready to swim. My dad is the starter, and he gives me the win or die look. I remember the feeling of fear and shame. Mom, are you listening to me? Will you help me? Will you talk to the coach and see if he'll put me in another race?" The vulnerability felt unbearable, and I wanted to scream, "Yes, you don't have to swim any event that you don't want to swim, ever." Later that night, my husband Steve and I discussed the issue and agreed that she would have to take it up with her coach. If he wanted her to swim the race, she needed to swim it. As right as the decision felt, I hated every minute of it. Ellen was upset when we told her this, and even more upset when she came home from practice and told us that her coach thought it was important for her to get an official time for the event. She folded her arms on the table, put her head down, and cried. At one point, she lifted her head up and said, "I could just scratch the event. A lot of people miss their heats. I won't win. Everyone is going to be watching." This was the opportunity to move levers, to redefine what's important to her. I looked at her and said, "You can scratch that event. I'd probably consider that option too. But what if your goal for that race isn't to win or even to get out of the water at the same time as the other girls? What if your goal is to show up and get wet?" She looked at me as if I was crazy. Just show up and get wet in the water? I explained that I had spent many years never trying anything that I wasn't already good at doing, and how those choices almost made me forget what it feels like to be brave. I said, "Sometimes the bravest and most important thing you can do is just show up." When it was time for the girls to get on the blocks, I wasn't sure if she'd be there, but she was. We stood at the end of her lane and held our breath. She looked right at us, nodded her head, and snapped her goggles into place. She was the last one out of the pool. The other swimmers had left the deck, and there were girls standing on the blocks ready for the next heat. Steve and I screamed and cheered the entire time. When she finally made her way to us, she was smiling and a little tearful. She looked at her dad and me and said, "That was pretty bad, but I did it. I showed up and I got wet. I was brave."